Hey y'all, it's me again. I'm going to continue reading from my book, The 1900s. Let's go. Taft is not Roosevelt. All Taft's personal feelings were immaterial, whether those of inertia before ill fortune assailed him, or those of irritability later. His treasure was merely that he was a placid man in a restless time, had a judicial temperament when the country was in a partisan mood, was a steady man in a dynamic age. Under other conditions, or in many of 4 years of the country's history, Taft's elephantine bulk, his good nature, his easygoing pace, might condemned him to the country, made him here and subsequently a legend of Gargantua, made him an ideal president. During any period, natural quiescence, Taft's mind had been uniquely in tune with the universe. His heartiness, genuineness, and sincerity might have been tonic similar to similar qualities in the country, but the people had recently drunk deep of the very different qualities of another personality. Having been stimulated by the heady wine of strenuousness, they could not be content with the tepid nectar of Taft's milder qualities. Taft's chief failing was that he differed from Roosevelt. His chief misfortune was that he followed Roosevelt in the presidency. The country had been tuned to the tempo of Roosevelt, and inevitably, therefore, could only be out of step with the tempo of Taft. To accent the maladjustment, Roosevelt told the country that Taft was like himself. Taft could not live up to that picture, and to fail to live up to expectations created others is a sure cause of failure. Taft might be an excellent president in a score of ways. All would do no good if he was not excellent in the precise way the country had been led to expect. Pathetically, with earnest goodwill, Taft had tried to be what Roosevelt had said he would be. I do nothing, he said, written to Roosevelt. He had written to Roosevelt as a lad took ship for Africa, without considering what you would do in the same circumstances, and without having a sentimental talk with you over the pros and cons of the situation. Taft had written that, in all sincerity, during his first month in the White House. He had meant to live up to it. He did not foresee that the role of trying to be Roosevelt involved a pose which his forthright simplicity would not permit him to continue. For Taft, any pose was distasteful to his character, impossible to his nature. He had to be himself, and Taft, as himself, placid, easygoing, slow to decide, was a far cry from the strenuous, quick-acting Roosevelt whom the country, with some important exceptions, had come to regard as a model of what a president ought to be. Seeds of Change, Peter Jennings and Todd Brewster. The period between 1900 and 1914 was an exciting and disturbing time in America. Broadcast journalist Peter Jennings and former Life magazine editor and writer Todd Brewster described the political, social, technological, and cultural changes that characterized this period. Americans had to prepare for what they thought the future would bring, write Jennings and Brewster. They explained that immigration was a major challenge, not only in respect to the number of immigrants, but to the ethnic diversity as well. In the author's view, incorporating the immigrants into American society was a major challenge to American ideals. Peter Jennings is anchor and senior editor of ABC News' World News Tonight. Todd Brewster is senior editorial producer of The Century. The end of the 19th century carried tension and foreboding because it coincided with the end of the absolutes that had governed life for so long. Charles Darwin's theories of evolution and natural selection introduced in 1859 and refined in 1872, has shaken man's understanding of his origins and his purpose. At the same time, socialism and democracy began to dominate the world political thought, agreeing at least on one tenet growing undeniable in these times, that the social order needed to be amended to take power from the elites and provide it to the masses. Finally, the growth of science and industrialism in the last days of the 1800s and the first of the new century have begun to prepare people for a new relationship with the natural environment. Technology promising conquest of the darkness, the light bulb, the sky, the airplane, the riser, the automobile, and many of the burdens of work, even as it introduced new avenues to entertainment, the phonographs, the movies, and communication, the telephone, the wireless. The machine, it appeared, was poised to become every man's slave, devoted and reliable, inexhaustible ox, and testament to man's ability to master his surroundings. Increasingly, people were even leaving the farm to live in a machine-made world, the city, knowing that it was there that the new life would emerge. Some of the biggest of these fast-growing metropolises, Paris, St. Louis, Buffalo, Atlanta, and of course, Chicago. I don't know why I said it like that. I guess I like Chicago. Held turn of the century fairs displaying the enormous promise of an industrial future. And this to people for whom the paper was still a novelty. Everywhere one looked, there was the sense of being at the end of one kind of history and the start of another. By 1911, the edges of the earth had been reached. The American explorer Robert Peary tackling the North Pole, the Norwegian Ronald Amundsen, I think that's how you say his last name, I don't know, landing on the South, but the sense of an exhausted past was not limited to geography. In the years that straddled 1900, art abandoned all pretensions to producing a realistic image, first shattering it into little cubes as French artist Henri Matisse announced, giving the name to one of painting's newest and most violent ideologies, and going onward from there to spend the rest of the century exploring the true frontier of abstraction. Music rejected traditional harmony for the otherworldly sounds of what composer Arnold Schwarzenberg, I think that's how you say his last name, I don't know, called pentonality. Literature played with the narrative, and physics with the discovery of the electron turned from the study of the macrocosmic forces of matter and energy that dominated the field in the 19th century to the microcosmic world of subatomic particles that would lead eventually to Hiroshima. Finally, there was the 1901 funeral of Queen Victoria, all by itself an impressive piece of timing. The monarch whose name had been synonymous with the passing era now herself passing along with that. In Europe, art and culture guided the march into the modern. But in America, technology loudly announced the promise of the future, bringing the enthusiasm of discovery and the confidence that the new age would be a better age. It was American inventors whose genius thrilled the world with possibility. Edison, the Wrights, and perhaps even more important, American industrialists, Rockefeller, Carnegie, and system builders, Ford, Taylor, Ingersoll, who understood how to deliver the new technology into the lives of the masses, and who could not see the excitement in this. Design by design, piece by piece, object by object, America's crusading capitalists were replacing the natural world with a new man-made world, promising to establish a new life, not just for the few, but for mankind, a world set in defiance of natural limits, a world shaped to fit man's needs, giving him comfort and pleasure, and most of all, freedom. And yet precisely because it was a defiance of nature, and because it was a life with so little precedent, because it offered none of the comfort associated with tradition, the thrill of the new era, The thrill of the new was received by nervous Ham. For now, it was mostly anticipation. A few more years and a horrific war would pass into history before the world would finally cast off the yoke of the 1800s and enter into what some were calling nothing less than sacred creation. Yet, even in the years leading up to World War I, Americans found themselves anxiously making adjustments to prepare for life as they imagined it would soon be, and in the process, tentatively approaching some of the challenges that would inform their lives onward throughout the 1800s. How, for instance, to put an American emperor on the exciting yet foreign age that they now faced? How to fit a society conceived as a decentralized agrarian republic into a century of urban and industrial might? How to adjust a mostly white Anglo-Saxon nation to the arrival of new immigrants from backgrounds alien to American traditions? How to reconcile competing notions of environmental or biological determinism with the American ideal of racial equality? How to execute the divine mission so many Americans believe to have been given to them as trustees of the world's progress, guardians of its righteous peace, yeah. Indeed, how to be an American in an alternately terrifying and exhilarating epoch unfolding before the 20th century. Please rate, comment, and subscribe down below. And if you're on YouTube, please ring that bell notification so that you can know when I upload. And if you're on TikTok, please like and follow my videos. And please buy something on my eBay and on my card. If you need my username for my eBay and or my card to look me up, please comment down below. Okay, bye.